Well, hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think we are about to start. We are 5 minutes late, but we are all academics, so that's okay. So, welcome to the Motors of the Sea session. So, is that okay?
Like this, not like this, like this.
It's okay?
That's better.
Okay. So I have to fix my arm in this rigid angle, so I don't know if I will ever recover from it. But so welcome again. We will start without further ado the session on Motors of the Sea. Well, it's very important for us. It's a very large session, the first one that we have after the approval, well, after the submission of the detailed implementation plan. Brian Simpson will tell you everything about it. Just in a nutshell, what will happen is that we'll have Brian presenting his report, speaking about the presentation of his report to the Parliament. Then we'll have the institutional stakeholder session, and that I will introduce you to afterwards, and then the industrial stakeholder session, and last but not least, we'll have the roundtable on Motors of the Sea issues. So without further ado, Brian Simpson, European Coordinator for Motors of the Sea. Brian.
Well, thank you, Jose, and thank you all for coming this morning to the Motorways of the Seas workshops. And just the sheer number of you would seem to indicate that we've come a long way in a not so long time span with Motorways of the Sea. Now, today I shall just briefly present the detailed implementation plan. It's the first work programme outlining the vision for the future of Motorways of the Sea concept as part of the maritime dimension in the 10T. And I'd like to start with and underline how important the Motorways of the Sea policy is for the overall integration of the EU transport corridors. I spend a lot of my time trying to convince my colleagues that we should work together. Now, this detailed implementation plan gives me an opportunity to do that. Now, how important a dimension of the 10T policy are we? Well, it's a very important dimension. I'm sure you've heard me say many times in the past that the maritime component is 40% of internal trade and 75% of external trade. We have in Europe more than 800 regular railroad connections and container services. They call in more than 400 ports and connect with hundreds of ports worldwide. Now, it's estimated that in 2014, the EU ports handle 3.8 billion tonnes of cargo, and around 3 billion tonnes are hinterland traffic that requires the handling either pre or post carriage by truck, rail or barge. There are 79 EU maritime ports are situated directly within 1 out of 9 core corridors, and these ports account for 2/3 of the total European port traffic. And finally, let me underline the growth aspect. European ports are directly linked to over 800,000 enterprises, generating in total the direct and indirect employment of about 3 million people. I was entrusted with the role of the European Coordinator of the Sea, in which we had to present a detailed implementation plan. Now, this document is only the beginning. Your contributions, as well as the inputs from the Member States and the European Parliament, is necessary to further enrich this policy and determine orientation of our future Motorways of the Seas actions. Once consultation has taken place, the plan will constitute a clear and precise guidance for the future direction of Motorways of the Sea policy. In other words, in what areas forthcoming projects should be orientated and how much money would be available. And I stress at this point your involvement. You are the stakeholders. I've been at great pains all throughout this process that we involve you, the stakeholders, and the European Parliament and the Member States in what we produce. And that holds good now. The document is built within the 3 development pillars for shipping and ports that are identified as my key priorities. You're probably getting sick to death of me keep pushing these, but I'll keep pushing them anyway until it's second nature to us all. And those 3 priorities are the environment, the integration of maritime transport and logistics chain, and maritime safety, the traffic management and human element of it all. And let me highlight the important points. First of all, the environment. This is a very important area, and it is worth noting that the shipping industry is the only industry with global regulation for air emissions. Motorways of the Sea can help the industry to comply with applicable EU and IMO legislation, mostly related to the environment, and MOS should favour projects related to A, air quality, in other words, help the industry to comply with air quality emissions and the sector area, support further development of LNG, methanol, alternative fuels, as well as explore other technical options, to continue to look into ways of lowering LNG storage and logistic costs, and work will continue on fuel efficiency and the use of fossil fuel in order to reduce the CO2 footprint. Second point is operational pollution. Further develop and pilot onboard treatment services like ballast water, recycling, black and grey water and so on. Look to accidental pollution. Measures aimed at improving safety, education, training. These practices are needed in order to improve global safety levels and further alleviate and avoid accidental pollution. And we need to look at environmental compensation measures and the financing of green shipping. Now, the second priority, the integration of maritime and logistics chains. We need to deal with integration of maritime transport in the global logistics chain. We need to support further short sea shipping. We need to develop flow management services to support both onshore organisations and ships in optimising overall traffic flows. We need to improve the last mile connection support. You'll excuse me saying last miles. I'm used to miles, not kilometres. Or we could change it to last kilometres, but I'll stick to last mile. Support further information and communication technologies so ships, ports and stakeholders can exchange information within interoperable systems and processes, both from the voyage management services point of view as well as an efficient cargo procedures. Finally, our outermost regions, I'm not forgetting here, MOS should support their connection with the mainland so they are not forgotten in the overall 10T policy, and let's enhance the geostrategic potential of islands by, for instance, promoting LNG refueling stations. The maritime safety is the third priority, the third pillar. The DIP lists a number of goals and objectives that should be attained thanks to the MOS programme. In safety, development, contingency planning and exercise drills in certain regions for dealing with emergencies and evacuations, for example, cruise ships. The human element, we need to reduce the link to human error, promote interdisciplinary skills, encourage seafarers to adopt a holistic view and provide them with the understanding of the general context of the industry that they're working in. And of course, with the new technologies, we need a new approach to training for those technologies. In traffic management, we need to develop maritime ICT and maritime information systems. Develop information sharing platforms. Rebalance traditional captain-based information systems with shoreside electronic information systems. So what is next? The document is comprehensive and includes an array of possible actions based on the three pillars that I have identified. It comprises a number of topics that covers the full spectrum of possible TEN-T development options. The next 12 months of consultation process should allow me to limit the number of development actions. Therefore, Motorways of the Seas will be better focused and specific to the extent possible. As I've said, I will engage in a close dialogue with you, the industry stakeholders, with the Member States and with the European Parliament to further fine-tune the most important actions that should be financed from the MOS budget. In conclusion, this document will be crucial for the future development and further development of EU maritime transport. Numerous data related to Motorways of the Seas has been collected so far, either through experience resulted from past or ongoing projects, of which there are 80, as well as close and regular discussions with you. The detailed implementation plan reflects various views and it constitutes a basis for a comprehensive work programme providing an integrated transport approach and other work plans with the 9 strategic vertical corridors. At last, ladies and gentlemen, at last, we are giving a serious focus in the TEN-T to our maritime strategy. Yes, we're late to the party, but at last we are giving it the priority it needs. And I thank you all for your attendance today and for your attention to what I've said. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. So we will start now with the institutional session. And the first stakeholder is Gesine Meissner. She is well known. She's a member of the European Parliament. Please, Gesine. Particularly, she's a member of the Transport Committee in the European Parliament, where she has worked very closely with Brian Simpson for the last 5 or 6 years at least. And very importantly, she is chair of the European Parliament Intergroup on sea, rivers, islands and coastal areas. So more maritime than this, it is not possible. Gesine, please.
So, hello ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to speak here on behalf of the European Parliament, and it's always a pleasure for me to be close to Brian Simpson, who really was an absolutely fantastic chair, and I like to cooperate with him, although he was of another political party, but it doesn't matter. So now it's on Motorways of the Sea, and as was pointed out, really I'm coming from the north of Germany, and And my first name, Gesine, it's a Frisian name, it comes from the coast. Maybe that's why I'm so passionate about ships, vessels, and maritime transport in general. That's why really it's a pleasure for me to be here. I have 4 points actually to mention. Some are similar to Brian's. I try to not really repeat what he said, but to add something additionally. My points are connectivity in general. Second is environment, like Brian. Third is safety, and the fourth is growth and jobs. Connectivity, I think it was pointed out how important the ports are. Some even say it's not 35% of global transport, but even maybe 90%. I don't know. I like it better to say 90%. It's still more importance for the vessels and the motorways of the sea. And of course, that's why it's a very important corridor, so to say, although it's not a corridor for the 10T network, and we have very much to focus on that. And besides, since the global-wide population is growing, the global-wide trade will grow as well. And of course, there will be more ships around the world. And since I work for that, and you, of course, as well, that Europe will stay as important as we are right now. Even if we have a decreasing population, then it's very important to focus on ports, on motorways of the sea, and everything that's in a good shape. And of course, we can improve something. We have to improve with the hinterlands of ports, for example, and we have to improve an inland waterway use. That's what Ryan mentioned as well. And of course, we should facilitate the whole ongoing transport. For example, with the with a single window in ports, it's not yet implemented, although it should be implemented by now. The directive were there, or was it a regulation? I always mix it up, but the legislative process were there, and it's not yet done. That is something very important, connectivity to the world and within Europe. Second point is environment. And I think we are quite far developed, especially in the north of Europe, because of the Zika zones. You know that the Zika zones were implemented in the 1st of January 2015, and that's why everybody was forced to be progressive regarding environmental friendliness, and that's why LNG is quite far developed, as well as I just recently went by a zero-emission ferry from Stockholm to Turku. By the way, it's a very nice trip to go. When you ever have time, do it, please. And yeah, it's a zero-emission vessel. LNG terminals are in place over there in the Baltic Sea and the North Sea, because really people were forced to look for that. And I really would like very much that the IMO would propose something for the rest of the world as well. We have an unfair competition, so to say, for all those who go in the ports in the Mediterranean. Still, we are allowed to have 3.5% of NOx, in the Baltic Sea is only 0.1, and later on it will be 0.5 in the Mediterranean. It's still more. And of course, whenever you are kind of forced to be environmental friendly, you will progress in being that, really, and having the right infrastructure in place. And we have this Clean Power of Transport package in the Parliament. It was decided, and there the ports have time until 2022 to have LNG terminals everywhere available. At first, it was a quite fast process, especially in Netherlands, for example, in Germany, and in the north again because of the Zika zone. And right now it's a little bit slowed down because of the low oil price. I don't want to have higher oil prices, of course, but I would like to have a quicker implementation of LNG in place. And it's not only LNG, it's zero emission, it's something with hydrogen, and so many things are possible. Scrubbers is, of course, just an interim method you can use. Anyway, it's very important for the environment to have something in place that's good for the future and ready for the future. And that helps us as well to be competitive, because worldwide we have quite good knowledge that can be as best practice be brought to other parts of the world as well. Third point was safety. Safety, of course, is very important, not only because of the environment. We have double hull tankers in place right now. It's obligatory even on barges on inland waterways. And of course, we want very much to have safe trips. Ships are a very safe mode of transport, not only environmentally friendly in general, but as well safe. And I just want to mention something on the safety point, because it wasn't said before, but in the Parliament we focused as well on the impact of the refugee crisis on transport in general, on the logistic and transport chain. And of course, you all know that in the Mediterranean, some vessels which are dedicated to transport freight, all of a sudden meet a rubber boat full of refugees and save them. Of course, they're not ready to do so, and I hope that the refugee crisis can be solved insofar as the people can stay at home and have a safe life over there. But as long as it's ongoing, of course, it's another thing that really has to be mentioned. That's why I thought it's kind of safety or saving people's life, although motorways of transport are not dedicated to be in place for that. And last but not least, I mentioned growth and jobs. The Blue Growth Strategy actually does mention cruises. Cruises is really growing market, and cruises go to ports, they go on motorways of the sea, and they are part of the Blue Growth Strategy. But in general, there will be by far more jobs still in future in the motorways of the sea, and not only for boys, but as well for girls. I always like to underline that, not only because I'm female, but I know that, for example, a captain on a vessel can be a female as well. And I was asked once by girls in the school class A, and when I have a baby, what do I do then? And I said, in case you have a baby, maybe you can stay onshore and do education, whatever. So it's many attractive jobs, but we have to look for good skills and good possibilities for education, and in order to really have an attractive sector for everybody who can have a very good job in future in this case. And something else, just at last, I wanted to mention, of course, motorways of the sea and ports are as well involved in another alternative energy strategy, because you know that offshore platforms, they need maintenance, they need pieces that are brought outside on the sea, on the platforms, and so we have offshore terminals right now in place. It's a good opportunity for ports to develop further, and it will be more crowded even on the motorways of the sea, but I think we can manage it, especially because we have a very good coordinator. So I'm happy to hear all the other speakers, and I'm looking forward for the discussion afterwards. Thank you.
That we show that we share common objectives, and that not all the monies are enough, but if we put them all working together for the same objectives, we'll do something about maritime transport. Thank you very much. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the first person that is incarnating since my university professor in the early 80s that was discussing marine affairs, the first person that is putting out a vision, well, the Dutch vision, an integrated vision for maritime transport policy. Brigitte Gisbers, and she's a director in the Ministry of Transport. So, please, Brigitte.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for the opportunity to speak here. And we organized during our presidency a high-level meeting on short sea shipping, and actually I would like to focus on the results of that and the outcomes and the recommendations of that high-level meeting. Mr. Simpson has just given his presentation on the detailed implementation plan for the future orientation of the motorways of the seas, and I would like to give some first reactions taking into account the outcomes of the high-level meeting on short sea shipping. The 5 bullets, maybe they told me there was some thing to work on to put on the next slide, but there isn't. Here it is. This one? The red one? The green. Okay, there it is. Thanks. And the 5 points you see here are some items that could possibly give more focus to this implementation plan. They are linked to the recommendations of the short sea shipping meeting, and that I will present to you in my next slides. I think the bullets speak for themselves. With regard to the reduction of administrative burden, I would like to mention that this can not only help to support the attractiveness of doing business, but also can be beneficial for the attractiveness of the profession itself, the seafarers and the officers that are needed on board of the vessels and who might not be eager to do paperwork all day. So on the 15th of February in Amsterdam, we focused on 5 points. I have to go on this a lot. And we came to recommendations, the next recommendations. Shipping is already, and it was already mentioned by Brian Simpson and by Georgina Meissner, shipping is a sustainable modality. It's an energy efficient modality because of the large volumes of goods that are transported. But still, there has to be done a lot. And in the conclusions of the COP21, shipping was not taken into account, but also shipping should become greener. And the ship owners associations already agree on this topic and on these conclusions. And therefore the high-level meeting came to the recommendation that the greening should be stimulated by EU co-financing with instruments like the Green Shipping Financing Tool. And of course these two recommendations fit very well into the first pillar mentioned in the Motorways of the Seas implementation plan. And there is already, and it was mentioned by previous speakers as well, the techniques are already available. LNG, emission reductions, SOx, NOx, techniques, scrubbers, etc. The technique is there, but it is also necessary that it is financial possible for the shipping companies to invest in these. Another recommendation of the high-level meeting was the short sea shipping. Was that short sea shipping should be an integrated part of the whole logistic chain. So it is important not to start organizing the logistics chain when the container is put on the quay in a port, but think and organize from door to door, from origin to destination. Therefore, digitalization and standardization and exchange of information between the different modes of transport in a synchro-model logistic chain is necessary. And ratifying and implementation of the Rotterdam rules is a good instrument for this. And it's good to see that also in the Motorways of the Seas, in this implementation plan, in its second pillar, this policy is taken up. And when we are talking about transporting goods by sea and compare it by transporting goods over land, you must be aware that when, for instance, you want to transport oranges from Spain to the Netherlands, by road you need only one document. When you transport these goods by sea, by short sea shipping, it takes you 12 different documents. So we have to work on that. And therefore you can imagine that the fourth recommendation of the high-level meeting focus on the reduction of administrative burdens. The maritime single window is a good instrument for this, but then it should be implemented everywhere in the same way as a machine-to-machine instrument. And customs should be linked to it. We need for that the use of harmonized data. And also here, on the basis of the Rotterdam rules, the ship manifest could be helpful as a multiple-used instrument, as a manifest which could be used also for the transport later in the chain. And the fifth recommendation is concerning blue growth, and it was also mentioned by a member of parliament that there are very much activities going on the sea. And she mentioned the offshore platforms, but also think about windmill farms, and there are very many other activities going on the seas. And therefore it's necessary that also we are linked to the blue growth and integrated, and shipping should be part of the integrated maritime spatial planning. And also governments and those who are responsible for shipping should take an active interest in this maritime spatial planning to make sure that also in future there is enough space for shipping on our seas. And after good discussions in the high-level meeting on short sea shipping, and I guess here today on the Motorways of the Seas implementation plan, I would say let's get it done together. Thank you.
Very much, David. We have now just attained 200 persons attending the workshop, which is a very large workshop. So Brian, you'll be happy with this. I think that the important thing is that Brigitte led us to it is this integrated vision where maritime transport is integrated in the global transportation chain. And that's exactly the same objective we are pursuing. And we are trying to develop and identify new challenges. One of them is, what about the regulator's view on these integrated transport issues? And with you will be João Carvalho, a very good friend. He is the Portuguese regulator for transport, so the only thing it doesn't regulate is air transport. That's okay, but they will be on time anyway. He has a long past in shipping. He was a ship owner, and which is very good now being a regulator. You have to tell us how you move from one place to the other. But he has an experience of over 40 years in maritime transportation, ports, as a ship owner. And now he's the Portuguese regulator for maritime, for transport, all modes of transport except aviation. João, the floor is yours.
Thank you, José. Thank you, Brian, for the invitation as well. And thank you for listening to me and these very brief words. Of course, now I am much more related with the law than rail, as well as ports and maritime, because my organization, it's a part of being an official organization, I mean governmental organization. It depends from the Portuguese Parliament, and it's completely independent. And so we regulate these modes of transport, and as José mentioned, with the exception of aviation. What I have to say about these motorways of the sea, together with the European port system, they are really key elements on this European maritime transport space without barriers, as well as for the transport single market. And we have now here a lot of challenges that will have impact on competitiveness, will have impact on the social dimension, as Brian mentioned, and which require policy strategic analysis, like this implementation plan that we have just listened. It was presented today, as well as proactive, it's very important, proactive action by the regulatory authorities as well as by the competition authorities. Also very important is internationalization of the European Union. And what I mean with this, I mean that for the competitiveness, for the growth, it is justified that we'll have agreements with other parts of the globe. It means that, for example, this TTIP that has been negotiated, at the moment it's also very important because we are talking of around 900 million people if and when this treaty will be finished between Europe, between the European Union and the United States. To have and to follow this global scope, it is very important investment. So it will be necessary a huge amount of investment, and we have here also ship owners on this room, and they know that either in ports, either on board of the vessels, in what concerns the first pillar that Brian has mentioned, I mean the environment. So to have more environmental friends on ports as well on ships, it's necessary a huge amount of money. So it's necessary that schemes, that combined schemes, either from public funds, I mean member state funds, or European funds, together with private capitals will be necessary. I want also, as a regulator, that we have some concerns, and I'm going to mention two main concerns at the time that there in Portugal that we feel. One concern is the lack of widely application of polluter pays or the user pays principles, because this through an asymmetric and inefficient taxation on the modes of transport can really bring lack of discussion on the competition. So it's very important these principles that can be mandatory. And I want, as an example of this, I want to mention some projects that have already finished, projects concerning the better